You are now tuned in to the Triple Threat Podcast.
Alrighty, welcome back to another free episode of Triple Threat Podcast. As always, my name is Ken Triplett, along with my usual partner in crime, Jordan Triplett, and we're here to discuss your beloved Buffalo Bills and the crushing wildcard defeat to the Houston Texans this past week. Jordan, despite all that, how you doing?
I'm feeling bittersweet right now. It was great to see this team in the playoffs. Great to see them put up such a lead at first and look like they could control a playoff game even at this early stage of this team's development. And also great to see the Patriots lose the same day. But obviously you hope they get it done, and they just didn't.
Yeah, a 16-point lead, and you just knew with that defense that this game was the Bills' game. They were playing the typical road game that the Bills usually play, just being inventive when they needed to, keeping teams on their heels and using their defense for a lot of 3-and-outs and just, aggressive play. And, even though they were kicking field goals, it's like, okay, they're building the lead. And 16-0 going into the half and coming out of it, you felt like, like the rest of the season or the entirety of the season that, this was a team that was 6-2 on the road, which is a really good road record and an absolutely great road record. And you just knew they had it. And then, unfortunately, the most Billsy things happened. And the ghosts of Bills past showed up, even though they weren't invited. And just a crushing loss, a crushing defeat for Bills fans. And I got to say this just to get it off my chest and just, for something therapeutic. I've been watching and been watching the NFL since I've been 9 years old, and consequently a Bills fan since I've been 9 years old. So I'm 50 years old now, and so 41 years of being a Bills fan and watching the Bills play and watching them have great years and sucky years and not so great years and mediocre years. And it's just really hard to go through this type of loss once again because you've seen it so many times. You've seen this movie so many times. You're like, okay, just can we watch something different? And unfortunately for the Bills, it just didn't happen. 22-19, your overtime loss to the Texans, and the things in this game that happened were just so bizarre. To add on to that, it's just really hard to watch this one out of your system.
Yeah, I fully agree. Even with me, I haven't been watching the Bills nearly as long. I'm only 23, and I don't remember when I started. Actually, no, I do remember. It had to be I didn't understand the game, obviously, but I've been watching since I was probably 5, back in maybe like 2001 or so. So I've been brought up in the mediocre Bills, and the Bills that haven't seen the playoffs in a long time. And I still knew everything was coming before it happened. Just, we all have this PTSD as Bills fans that we all know, all right, how are they going to screw this one up? How are they going to mess this one up? And I feel like I've been waiting for that moment all season, and it just happened to culminate in the playoffs, and at least they got there. But you can only say that for so many years before it's like, all right, guys, we actually need to win these playoff games or something needs to change. But it's still early for me, myself as a Bills fan watching them, and still early for this current team's construction to keep moving forward. And we can only believe that they'll get better and better and better.
And that begs a question, Jordan, and to all you Bills fans out there, Bills Mafia, what this loss means overall for the Bills' progression. What obviously you want to look at, the natural progression is that you've had this breakthrough season, you've got this young talent, and we're ready for the next step. Now, that doesn't always happen in sports. Sometimes you do take a step back when you expect to take a step forward. So it's not a guarantee that the Bills are going to have as great of a draft as they did last year, or sign the type of free agents that they did this year that made them improve incrementally this year. By the face of it, the schedule looks tougher. So I think it's a mistake to assume that, okay, this is a playoff team again next year. We just have to be really careful about our expectations with this team and where this team can go. So we're going to get into that a little bit later in this podcast, but we are going to kind of like take a look at this game and just recap it just a bit in terms of the key elements that contributed to the loss. And I, for one, am a fan, Jordan. I never blame the officiating for my sports teams losing. Now, granted, there can be key situations where a referee blows a call that is huge in the game, but overall, I look at the entirety of the game in terms of, okay, what put you in that position to make that call so impactful that made you lose the game? But I don't blame the officiating for losing the game, and so I don't want to hear about officiating. It's just a waste of time. And I think it's a loser mentality, because I think as a player, as a team, I think you control everything within the game, that if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, there isn't a call that can be made that can make you lose a game. So I have 5 key elements that contributed to the Bills' loss. And the first one I want to talk about is play calling, which has been a problem, which has been a bugaboo all season long for the Bills. Brian Daboll, especially in the second half, was just atrocious. It seemed like he lost a handle on what this team needed to do to win this game, because it seemed like he just panicked. What are your thoughts?
I don't think it was panic per se on what he was doing. I think it was more of, these teams are calling me, let me show them what I can do in the playoffs. Because there's no other reason why I think he would have Josh Allen throw the ball 46 times this game. He if anybody knows Josh Allen's limitations best, it has to be the coaching staff, the quarterback's coach, the offensive coordinator, the head coach. I don't think any of them would think it's a winning game plan to have him throw the ball 46 times in a game, especially for a game that we were winning 16-zip for most of the game here. And with that, he just looked like he was trying to make his resume a little beefed up there. And nothing else makes sense to me in my mind for why he would have him throw the ball so many times, especially when not only has the running game been well, Josh Allen was the leading rusher. Like, if you want to have Josh Allen have the ball, let him run it a little more. Give it a Singletary. Let's keep milking the clock. There's no reason to the only reason they did blow this lead was the same reason the Falcons blew the Super Bowl lead 28-3, because they kept passing the football. Mm-hmm. Just run the ball, milk the clock, keep moving on.
Right. And that was my second point, that the Bills got away from the run game. That's the second key element that I wanted to talk about. And, the reason why I say he panicked with the play calling is because, especially in the overtime, he went empty the entire time. Maybe 1 or 2 plays where he did bring it back into, or Josh Allen himself brought it back into the backfield only for pass protection, because he saw something in the defense. And, but the original intent by Daboll was to go empty and just let Josh Allen just wing it. And like you said earlier, your personnel, Josh Allen, his strengths and weaknesses. I think it's a panic move just to say, well, I don't have anything else but to, give this kid 5 wide receivers in the hopes that he can find one open. It speaks of, not having a good handle on the pulse of the game. It played right into the Texans' momentum. They just reared back. They just pinned their ears back and say, hey, I'll meet you at the quarterback. And it was a horrible philosophy, a horrible game plan to go empty that many times, to take Singletary out of the game. And, at that point in time, it wasn't a possession type of game, because obviously we're in overtime. But even in the fourth quarter, when you could have run a bit more to get closer to a W, you still chose not to. And it was just obviously just a disappointing way to kind of look at the Bills imploding, if you will, from the coaching staff to Josh Allen's play, which we'll get into a little bit later when we do talk about Josh Allen. But my third point, Jordan, and this goes to the defense, and this is where the defense kind of let us down a bit, and you could see it probably within the last 2 to 3 games that the Bills have been playing or defensively. Poor tackling. And obviously the worst case example in that would be the situation where they had Deshaun Watson dead to rights on 3rd and long, And you had Saran Neal bounce off one side, and you had Mike Milano bounce off the other side. He scrambles. He finds an open receiver who goes for 30-plus yards, and they kick the winning field goal. Game is over. But if you get that sack, they punt, we have a chance to win the game. Just, again, the most Billsy way to lose a game in front of the world, which is very disheartening.
Again, it's the same with the explanation. The only way you can explain it is that it's the Bills, because they look so strong and promising when we started out this game. Obviously, that 16-zip lead. But then at first, we were holding Hopkins to no catches. He was targeted a couple times, but our all-pro Trey White stepped up, locked them up, and then the second half hit, and we were playing all these soft zones and soft coverages, and that led to Hopkins going underneath on a few crossing routes and a few out routes to get him going, and then he really started to take over on a few drives, getting some key first downs for them to keep them alive in the game. And I thought a couple of the balls that Hopkins caught, Trey White could have made a better play, but like you said, the defense on that 3rd and 18, they should have come up with that sack. But even then, they still had them 3rd and 18, and they had every defender that wasn't on the line or rushing, every single one of them was right at the first down marker. There's no reason to play that deep, especially when they do need to go 18 yards. If anything, you press those guys to mess up the timing of the routes and the quarterback while the rush continues to get there. And they still almost got there, and they just couldn't make the play. And just a lot of letdowns from guys who you thought would step up and be the star to take over the game. I don't really blame Trey White too much, but that second half, he gave up 90 yards to Hopkins, and on top of that, we're missing tackles left and right. They had that one play to Tywan Jones, former Bill, and he gashed us up for that huge run that he made at the end in overtime there to set up the game-winning field goal for the Texans, and just so many letdowns left and right. And to your point earlier, I don't blame the refs at all. I don't think they had anything to do with it. Yeah, the Cody Ford call was questionable, but it shouldn't have even come down to that. They should have locked this game away way earlier.
Exactly. And you know, what you've been speaking to, Jordan, begs a question. Did this coaching staff get out coached in this game? And you can point to the crossing routes that Hopkins made in the second half. That was an adjustment by the Texans to get Hopkins free and get him open. Because one-on-one on the vertical routes that Trey Wright was on him, Trey Wright had him locked. But so once you get to the crossing patterns, the Bills even seemed to be lost and couldn't trail him, couldn't keep track of him. He got free. He made some catches. He got into a groove. And then you look at the situation with that 3rd and 18, where you did have the Bills drop way too far back in coverage. And Tremaine Edmonds was one of the defenders, in that play responsible for the middle of the field. And although he's had a great season, he played a really good game. The defenders on that play seemed soft in approaching the carrier. They didn't seem to step up. They didn't seem to want to lay a good lick on him. All three of those guys were near the defender, who was obviously, diving for that first down. They should have known that. They just kind of half-assed it, if you will, in terms of making that tackle and making sure he didn't get past that first down marker. And you look at things like that, and maybe these are things that they talk about playoff experience, where, you have to have that fire. You have to pay attention to detail for the entirety of the game, that maybe they'll learn from this. But again, it's a little bit too little too late in terms of the Bills being able to get the job done, especially on that play, which has been disheartening. So, that was my fourth point. You really feed into all my points here, was that overall there was poor game management by McDermott. And a part of that, in addition to what I just mentioned, was the decision-making. He decided to go forward on 4th and 27 with Josh Allen as your quarterback, who's not ready for that situation. They didn't have to go forward on 4th and 27. Even though the field goal at that time would have been insanely long, you still had that opportunity to try something, to try and get some points on the board. But that's just one small example of McDermott kind of, I don't want to say panicking, but being a second playoff game, it still seemed like there were portions of the game that were too big for him. And that, to me, was surprising. And that, to me, again, I hate to use this word, it sounds like a broken record. It seemed disheartening that McDermott just made some really questionable decisions in crunch time when the Bills needed him to make the sound decision.
Yeah, I thought you could sum this game up in one phrase for every phase of the football game, that being offense, defense, coaching, every single thing. Nobody was ready for prime time. Not a single one of them. The coaches looked overwhelmed at times with their calling. Like even on defense, Leslie Frazier, he has been phenomenal for this defense. We have a top 5 defense largely because of him and the talent he's able to put in the right places to succeed. And that 3rd and 18, big example. In clutch time and crunch time, we can't have that happen. On offense, the plays that we would call so many times on key third and even up to the 4th downs that we got, that 4th and 27, just not where we need this team to be. And Josh Allen particularly, he had the ball mostly, so we absolutely saw it through him that he was not at all ready for this moment. We'll get to him later because I'm sure I'll have a lot and you'll have a lot to say about how much he wasn't ready. Even down to our receivers, like where was everybody else? Singletary was our leading receiver. John Brown, he still had 4 receptions, 50 yards. Duke Williams dropped a huge ball that we needed. Back to John Brown, Josh Allen gave him a beautiful ball on the sidelines, and the commentators blamed it on, oh, it's timing. If he throws that a hair earlier, it'll get him bounced. Like, yeah, sure. But he still delivered a good ball, and John Brown absolutely could have kept his feet in there had he had a little bit more field awareness. And then
that was a poor effort by John Brown. I mean, that again, to me, that speaks to, I guess, like a playoff experience where you do have to really, your focus has to be a lot more, for lack of a better term, sharper in a playoff game as opposed to a regular season game, and that comes with experience and learning. Okay, I've got to really hone in on my skill set. And that was a play where John Brown should have made that catch. But it seemed like the effort in terms of getting his feet set and getting them ready was just not there. And that's a situation where, again, hopefully the Bills can learn from. We'll see, but, we'll never know because they won't have an opportunity to prove themselves again, at least for this particular year. Now, you mentioned Josh Allen. Let's get to him right now because this is my 5th point and final point of the key elements that contributed to the loss. It was the hero ball that Josh Allen played in the second half and especially in overtime, where Josh really began to regress a bit because he could feel the pressure of trying to put this game on his shoulders and saying, okay, I've messed up. Now I'm going to make a spectacular play and, I'm going to win this thing for us. And you can tell because of his post-game remarks about how he put this loss on his shoulders and everybody's like, huh, what? That's the right thing to say as a leader of a team and as a quarterback, but it seemed kind of misplaced in terms of how the game played out and how people analyzed the game. But to me, it spoke to his propensity to play hero ball. And there are so many plays. One that I can bring out in particular was the long ball to his fullback of all people. Double covered. And he throws a deep bomb to Pat DeMarco. And it's like, what are you doing? I'm just speechless still, just thinking about his decision-making as a huge factor in terms of why the Bills lost this game.
Yeah, that play is probably the epitome of this football game. The very, very first offensive snap of overtime. Let's go 5 wide. And not only will we go 5 wide, we're going to have Pat DeMarco out there and send him on the fly. And not only are we going to do that, Josh Allen, let's throw to him double covered like he's gonna come down with that ball. First play of overtime. We only needed a field goal at this point because the Texans just gave us the ball back. So many things about that play. I could go on forever and rewind that on tape and point out everything wrong. The protection was great. He had plenty of time. Josh, he could have ran with that ball and even got like 7 yards before he had to slide or go out of bounds. But the decision making is just bad. And this game, it showed us a lot that we've been talking about all year with this team on things they need to fix up. And every single deficiency reared its ugly head in this game. Not only with Josh Allen, but the team as a whole, like the ball security. At first, that one fumble that he had, I thought he just dropped it. On the film, you can see Whitney Merciless barely tapped the ball, like with his offhand, not even trying to reach for it, but that shouldn't happen. He should have tucked that ball away knowing his guy was there, or at least hold it better than he did. You're in a playoff game, dude. Protect the football with the lead.
It really seemed like the defender got a fingertip on the ball and the ball popped out. And, which you and I were texting during the game. And, I remarked that he has the worst ball security of any quarterback or maybe any player I've ever seen in my life. And that's got to change. That's got to stop. He's got to find a way to protect the ball better than that in all facets of the game. And that also brings up another point about his hero ball, especially in big games. And it's something that, we'll talk about in our next topic about Josh Allen, but the play where he scrambles and he gets a 25-yard gainer.
And then he pitches
He pitches the ball to seemingly no one. Because I don't know when you look back at that play if he actually saw anyone behind him. Thankfully, I believe it was Sweeney that was behind him or Knox. But it was like, again, it was a huge play that could have been disastrous had not the Bills player knocked the ball out of bounds, which we got a penalty for, which took away from the big game. But you don't make these plays, the DeMarco play and the lateral play that he made or tried to make. You don't make that play in college. You don't make that decision in high school. You don't make that decision in middle school. And that's something that's got to change about this kid's makeup, which I, for one, am not sure he's capable of. And that's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd still give him the benefit of the doubt because it is so early. And Josh has said it himself. He's still learning the facets of the NFL game where he doesn't have to look for a touchdown every play. He's just looking for a first down. And he said that's something that he's still learning and buying into, even from his mentor, Jim Kelly, right now. And what the coaching staff has been telling him, that he doesn't have to win the game on one play every single time he gets to snap. And clearly, everything that was instilled in him all year, especially through this run that we made to get to the playoffs. And he showed he learned that at first, but it just went all down the drain as soon as it hit playoff time, as soon as it hit the fourth quarter, as soon as it hit overtime. He was back in his old habits. Let me try to launch it, make the big play. Let me try to run it, make the big play. And it just turned out worse every single time. The pitch back to either Knox or Sweeney, I'm not sure which one it was. I know it was one of them. What is he doing on that play? The time is not running out. I do believe we were a little bit low in terms of timeouts. I don't even think we did have a timeout. But he still had like at least a minute or more left in the game. We could easily run up the field and spike the ball. Who is he pitching it to? Like there is 3 seconds on the board left. He just, where is your knowledge? Where is your antennas at during this game? You are the quarterback. You got to know the situation, bro. What are you doing?
Well, that remains to be seen. And only right now, only a sports psychologist can probably get the answer to that, and speaking to Josh directly. And hopefully, the Bills have that in place for their players to get those answers. But, that's another topic for a different day. But it does lead us to the next area that we want to talk about. And it's a question that after season 2, the Bills have to ask themselves, and we as fans are asking right now. Is Josh Allen the Bills franchise quarterback? What are your thoughts?
I think he still is. I have full faith in his growth. I've seen a lot worse from our quarterbacks in my history of watching the Bills. The only good quarterbacks I've seen the Bills have is Drew Bledsoe for that little bit of time, and then the stints of Tyrod Taylor where he showed his flashes of greatness from time to time. And for Josh Allen being in his second year, I've seen enough to know that we should absolutely continue progressing with the kid. There's no reason to label him a sort of Mitchell Trubisky kind of guy. He has a lot of time to develop, and he still makes a lot of throws where you just see the talent ooze out. There was one across the body throw, and like many of Josh Allen's plays, you're like, no, 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 no. And then he delivers it perfectly across the body. Like, it was only maybe 15 yards up the field, but in terms of actual distance, that's like a 35-yard pass pretty much off your back foot that he just nailed on the target. And you're like, okay, let's keep the sticks moving then, Josh. Good play. But at the same time, then you have plays like the DeMarco launch, or the plays where Roby on the Texans, he dropped two picks that were right in his hands that could have ended the game both times that he did so. And you just get a lot of good Josh and a lot of bad Josh, and that's why he gets those Brett Favre comparisons. But obviously, to continue moving forward, he has to hone in on more of the good Josh, way less of the bad Josh. I mean, that's obvious to say, but if we didn't have to say it, we wouldn't be here right now.
Well, here's the thing about the Brett Favre comparisons in regards to Josh Allen. Brett Favre put points on the board, so you could live with his hero ball because you knew he was going to get right back on the field and get those points back if he threw a pick six or if he threw a bad interception that, caused field position to flip or whatever the case may be. You knew that Brett Favre would come back, rectify his mistake, and get you back on schedule. We don't have that yet with Josh Allen. And, so it remains to be seen whether or not he can get into that category of really being compared to a young Brett Favre. Now, as far as I'm concerned, as far as the franchise situation is concerned with Josh Allen, I'm going to say the jury is still out. I'm going to say, as of now, he is the Bills franchise quarterback. But year 3 is a critical year for him, as it is with all young quarterbacks. If he stays the same or if he digresses, it's time to move on. Seen enough, seen this movie, he's just not the guy. If he progresses, if he gets better, and that's what I'm going to be looking for as every Bills fan will be looking for the 2020 season, is that you want to see him make a lot less of those boneheaded, head-scratching plays that we saw in the Texans game. You want to see him be able to move an offense. It's not just all about the wide receivers, although I'm sure the Bills are going to get him some more help in that area. But it's just about being consistent. It's about looking polished. And it's about being able to make and being willing to make the mundane throw that keeps a team on schedule, as opposed to getting them off schedule by making a poor decision, or making a poor throw. And that's the next step for Josh Allen. Can you keep this offense on schedule, whereby if you continue to do that, you're going to make plenty of big plays because you're so talented, and just the nature of athletes in the NFL, things are going to break loose. Just be patient. So that's what I'm looking for next year, that type of progression from him. And if I see it, I will be completely convinced that he's a franchise quarterback and we've got a winner to work with and look forward to. But as of right now, they don't have many options to go with. So we have to give him this third year. We have to give him the benefit of the doubt, like you said. But it comes with stipulations. He has to make that next step where he is a lot more consistent. We're putting up at least 20 to 24 points a game, not the 10 to 16 points a game that he did this year. And a lot of factors can roll into that, but that's what he's got to do to get this team over the hurdle into being a true playoff and then later Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, I need a 2-to-1 ratio of touchdowns to turnovers, and I would say interceptions to touchdowns, or rather touchdowns to interceptions. But those fumbles are the main ones that kill. He doesn't really throw the ball too many times to the other team, but he just drops it so dang much. Like, give me a 2-to-1 ratio of touchdowns to turnovers, and I will be fully on board with the Josh Allen train.
Well, I think that comes with, again, staying on schedule, keeping an offense on schedule. the Bills are going to give him a running game. Singletary has proven to me, at least, that he is an absolute monster. And when he's properly fed, he's going to keep an offense and keep a defense on its heels. But it's like a gift that Daboll hasn't figured out how to use yet. And I'm not sure if Daboll is going to actually get it at any time. But if he's used properly, he's a gift to Josh Allen. Josh Allen's best friend is play action. And once you get some better receivers around him or bigger targets around him or just more help, period, a better offensive line around him, you're going to see those dividends pay off. So that brings us to the next area that we want to discuss in terms of the Buffalo Bills and their next steps. What are the next steps for the Bills to reach that next level next season? What type of all-season moves would you want to see for the Bills to make? And we'll start with free agency and the draft. And obviously the number one thing that Bills fans want to see is more wide receiver help.
Yeah, this is something that you're going to hear all year, and you probably actually already have heard it all year, and will continue to hear it all year and all off season until the next season does start. Clearly, we need what they call a home run hitter. I've seen that being the most frequent use of what they call the need for us here. We just need a playmaker, a guy that is better than John Brown. Singletary, he's like you said, he's going to be a star, a monster. He has shown that he can run on NFL defenses, and he's only going to get better and stronger and faster as he continues to move on. So I think we're good at the running back position. We might need somebody to replace Gore's spot, the guy that spells Singletary, but that's not a huge need. Like you said, wide receiver, we're looking at guys who can really open up Josh Allen's game and be a real release valve and safety measure for him. And I think I would rather us draft a guy. And I know you've said you like the approach of drafting and getting a veteran. In terms of a number one guy, just so the field doesn't get too crowded, I'd rather draft our number one guy, whether that be CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins, anybody in this deep class, receiver class. I would love it. In terms of free agents, I don't believe there's too many top names that I'm not wary of. Amari Cooper will demand a lot of money. I think that's a pipe dream for the Bills. AJ Green, he's great, but he's had his injury issues that we need to look out for. I don't want a lot of dead money thrown out to him if he's not gonna end up suiting up most of the games. And other than that, there's not that many free agent receivers out there that I would really break the bank for.
Well, in terms of free agency, I don't think the Bills need to look at their premier names. And I wouldn't personally do that. I would look at what Brandon Beane has done, this particular offseason, looking for those Class B free agents, if you will, that can help this team not necessarily be a number one wide receiver, but be someone who can be a starter and just give Josh Allen a bigger target. And that's why I think you should mix their number one draft pick, which should be a wide receiver that has top class athleticism, size, and speed. I want a guy who's at least 6'1", 200 pounds, 210 pounds, 225, whatever the case may be. I want a big target for Josh Allen. So I think that's needed for every quarterback. And I think with that kind of mix, you've got the young receiver who's got all this talent that can grow within your system. And then you've got the veteran who's got maybe 5 to 8 years experience with an NFL club that already knows how to play the position. That can be another layer of comfort for you at the wide receiver spot and give you depth and give you flexibility with the types of plays and just cause problems for teams that, hey, you can't necessarily bracket John Brown as often if you've got these other stud wide receivers running patterns for you. You've got to pick your poison, so to speak. So I just think that's the way to go. I think you need to attack it on both ends. And I think, obviously wide receiver is not the only position that the Bills will need to look at. I think they do have still some problems with the offensive line that they need to improve upon. So I'd like to see them early in the draft address that as well. And most importantly, I think that people forget the real importance and the real need to re-sign your own players. And I think there are several players that I like the Bills to re-sign. I think Shaq Lawson has earned a big contract the way he's played this year. I wouldn't re-sign Jordan Phillips. I think he had a contract year, but I think, and I think this game really proved it to me at least in terms of, he just kind of vanished, especially down the stretch this year, that he's kind of shown you that, hey, I did have a career year, but I think it's a flash in the pan. And I think it's fool's gold to re-sign a guy like Jordan Phillips to a large contract, because I don't think he's that guy. So I just wouldn't do it. But I think it's important to re-sign your key players to keep this team intact and keep them rolling.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of the opposite myself. I would much rather keep Jordan Phillips rather than Shaq Lawson. I think in terms of the scheme that we run, we still do run 4-3, and I think there's a lot of guys that could help us out at that position. And especially at some point, I know we'll also have to move on from Jerry Hughes. So I'd rather keep the middle of our line intact. Jordan Phillips, not only with the 9.5 sacks on the year, but he's great in run support. He's great in eating up the double teams and filling up the holes in the run game. We kind of saw that against the Texans because they weren't able to really run the ball at all. We controlled the line of scrimmage for the most part with the running game, better than they did ours at least. And for that reason, I think edge rusher is where we should be spending all this cap space on both the left and the right side. So I look at guys that are coming out of contracts like Yannick Ngakoue from Jacksonville. He's only 25 right now. He's a guy that can continue growing in the system. And there's other guys out there that I would like to look at because we also lost Lorenzo Alexander. And he's a guy who has spent most of this year continuing to rush the quarterback. Rather than play in coverage. So we could look at guys like maybe Ezekiel Ansah, who's coming out of Seattle right now. He's only 31 right now. He could be that veteran sort of presence on that line. But I think Shaq Lawson will give way too much money for what he's going to give us as a team that we can't get for elsewhere. Either better for more money or at the same level for less money.
Well, I think that you have to ask yourself this question when it comes to Jordan Phillips. I agree with your assessment in terms of his value that he brings to the Bills, but I think if there are other teams that are kind of fooled by his overall talent, they're going to overpay. And if they offer him an overpay and the Bills are going to have to match that, I just think that whatever that price tag is going to be too much. So that's why I would not re-sign Jordan Phillips for that reason. I think Shaq Lawson comes at a better overall value for the price. And I think that, he's a guy that is your own homegrown talent that can continue to get better. And for that reason, I think he comes at a lesser price tag, but you're getting more overall value in return because of that lesser price tag. So, that's my reasoning for it. But again, I don't want Bills fans to understand and realize that re-signing our own players is number one. And then number two, you go after one or two big fish. And then you go for the B free agents that can bring you depth and bring you the core cultural values players that Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane want to bring into the locker room. So having said that, let's move on to wrapping up the show, and let's talk about the rest of the NFL playoffs. We have 4 games, obviously, this week in the divisional round playoffs. I'm just going to cut it really quick to the chase here. So you've got Titans at the Ravens. I'm going to go with the Ravens winning that game. Texans at Kansas City. I like the Chiefs in that game. So both both AFC teams will win at home. I like Green Bay at home over Seattle. And I like Minnesota to keep it rolling and winning on the road again at San Francisco.
Wow.
So overall, I've got Kansas City beating the Ravens to go to the Super Bowl to represent the AFC. And I'm rolling with Kirk Cousins, man. I don't know why, but and that defense, I think he got the monkey off his back, and I think he's going to play relax and with a mentality of he doesn't have much to lose. So I'm going to go with the Kansas City Chief Minnesota Vikings Super Bowl, with your Super Bowl champion being the Kansas City Chiefs. Andy Reid gets his first ring.
Yeah, I'm going with, we have all the same picks, except I don't think the 49ers are going to drop this one at home to the Vikings. I got pretty much all the home teams: Kansas City, Baltimore, Green Bay, and San Francisco. Seattle's just a little too banged up. If they were fully healthy, I'd give it to them over Green Bay. But moving on with that, I think the Niners just have a better overall team than the Packers, so I have the Niners in my Super Bowl. And then in terms of Ravens versus Chiefs, I think the Ravens are the strongest team now. And then at first I picked the Ravens, but now that I think about it more, they're still a young team themselves, and Lamar Jackson may have the same hurdles of fully learning how to win these tough games in the playoffs. And Mahomes, he seems like the next guy up, and the defense is much improved. So I got Chiefs and Niners. And then to win it all, I'm going to go with the Chiefs. Andy Reid getting his first ring and getting the monkey off of his back in terms of that. And Patrick Mahomes truly showing that he is the class of all quarterbacks in the NFL.
All righty. So there you have it. We both agree on our eventual Super Bowl champion, the Kansas City Chiefs, in terms of our predictions. Bills fans, it was a tough one to swallow, but unfortunately, we're used to it. So we look forward to 2020 season and next year. That doesn't mean the Triple Threat podcast goes away. We're going to go into the NBA. And we'll still talk about the NFL and the playoffs here and there. But in the next few episodes, you're going to hear more NBA talk. Jordan and I are both fans of the Philadelphia 76ers, so we'll have a focus on them. But so we want you guys to stick around for the next podcast. But until then, we'll see you soon. Back at you next time. Triple Threat Podcast. Take care.